Good morning, boys and girls. We are on page 93, lesson 17 homework. Make sure you are turning to the correct page. For the first question here, it states estimate the quotient for the following problems. The first one is done for you. I'm going to pause because the word estimate you're going to remember as rounding. So they want you to round or to estimate. And the quotient means the answer to a division problem. So they want you to find the answer to a division problem. So if you notice, just looking at all of these numbers down here, there is a division sign. So they do want an answer to a division problem. Now, for A, they give you an example so that you can look at. And if you're looking at it, you notice that they are rounding. They're rounding 821 or estimating 821 to 800 and 41 to 40. Very interesting. After you round 800 divided by 40, you get 20 as your final answer. So that's what we're going to do for the rest of the problems. Now, the very interesting thing about this is they want you to estimate problems that are closer to an equation that you know. So they don't want you to round a ridiculously large number that's not going to benefit you. They want you to round a number that is large, but also rounds evenly into a number. Let me kind of show you so that you can see for yourselves. 617 divided by 23. If I were to look at this number, I would round 617 and thinking, is 617 closer to 600 or is it closer to 700? 617 is closer to 600, so I'm running down 600. Is 23 closer to 20 or is it closer to 30? 23 is closer to 20 because it's only 3 numbers away from 20, so I'm running down 20. So now I'm going to divide 600 divided by 20. So I'm going to write that down, 600 divided by 20. I know that I can cross off my zeros, and the reason being is because 20 divides evenly into my numbers, 60. So 2 goes into 6 3 times, and 2 can go into 0 0 times. So I get my answer of 30. So my final answer is equal to 30. For next problem, I have 821 divided by 39. So same thing. I know that 821 is closer to 800 than it is to 900. So I'm running down 800. 39 is closer to 40 than it is closer to 30. So I'm running down 40. Now I'm going to make sure I divide. I have 800 divided by 40. The first number is always going to be at the top, and the second number is always going to be at the bottom. So now I'm going to divide. I'm crossing off my zeros because I know that 0 can be divided into 0 0 times, so I don't need to worry about that. Now I know that 8 divided by 4 is equal to 2, and 0 divided by 4 is equal to 0, so I get my final answer of 20. Excuse me, sorry. Now problem D. We have 482. 482 can be divided into 400 or 500. 482 can be estimated as 500. 52 can be estimated into 50 because 52 is closer to 50 than it is to 60. Now I have 500 divided by 50. I know that 0 can be divided into 0, so that's why I'm crossing off my zeros. And I know that 5 can go into 50 10 times. So my final answer is equal to 10. Now I'm moving on to problem E. Problem E, I have 531. Is 531 closer to 500 or is it closer to 600? It is closer to 500. Is 48 closer to 40 or is it closer to 50? 48 is closer to 50. How many times can 50 go into 500? I know that 0 divided by 0 is equal to 0. That's why I'm crossing it off. 50 divided by 5, again, is equal to 10. So my final answer is equal to 10. Now over here I have 141 divided by 73. Okay, I know that 141 is closer to 100. 73 is closer to, we need to think, is it closer to 100 or is it closer to 0? It's closer to 100. 100 divided by 100 is equal to 1. Problem G, I have 476 divided by 81. Is 476 closer to 500 or is it closer to 400? It is closer to 500. 81, is 81 closer to 0 or is it closer to 100? It is closer to 100. Now, you're noticing, Miss Tran, wouldn't I have rounded 81 to 80 rather than 100? No. So in this case, what you're looking for is what is going to give me an easier estimate so that I can easily and mentally divide in my head if I were to go to a grocery store or if I were to go, to do simple math. I want to make sure that my estimate is easy to round so that when I'm applying this to real life, it is easy for me to use. So it is much easier for me to round 476 to 500 than it is for me to round it to 1,000. And 81 is easier for me to round it to 100 than it is to round to 80. Because 500 divided by 80 is going to be more difficult to figure out in your head than 500 divided by 100. In this case, we're writing 500 divided by 100. Okay? So, now that I'm looking at my numbers, I have 500 divided by 100. I know that 0 divided by 0 is equal to 0. And 5 divided by 1 is equal to 5. So I'm estimating my answer to 5. And that is an easier number for you to work with if you were to apply it in real life than it is for you to write it down on a piece of paper. And that's what we're learning today. How can we use these numbers in real life if we are applying it to real life situations? So, the next problem we have here is 645. Is 645 closer to 600 or to 700? I'm going to round it to 700 because in this case, I want to use an easier number. So we have 69 can be rounded to 70. 700 divided by 70 is easier to round than if I were to have 600 divided by 70. So that's why I rounded this one to 700. Now we have 70 divided by 7. 70 divided by 7 is equal to 10. So my final answer is 10. Now how about this one over here? We have 599 divided by 99. I know that 99 is closer to 100 and 599 can be rounded to 600. 600 divided by 100. 0 divided by 0 is equal to 0, so I can cross those out. 6 divided by 1 is equal to 6. So my final answer is equal to 6. Now I'm going to move on to problem J. Problem J says 301 divided by 26. 301 can be rounded to 300 and 26 can be rounded to 30. 300 divided by 30. 0 divided by 0 is equal to 0, so I can cross it out. 30 divided by 3 is equal to 10. So my final answer is 10. Over here we have 729 divided by 81. I can round 81 to 80 and I can round 729 to 800 so that it is easier to round. So I have 800 divided by 80. 0 divided by 0 is equal to 0, so I can cross it out. 80 divided by 8 is equal to 10. Moving on to the next problem. I have 636 divided by 25. 636 can be rounded to 600 and 25 can be rounded to 30. 600 divided by 30. 0 divided by 0 is equal to 0. 60 divided by 3 is going to give me 20. So my final answer is 20. Now over here, I have 835 divided by 89. So I'm going to make sure that I am rounding that. Sorry, I need to move paper around. 835 can be rounded to 900 and 89 can be rounded to 90. 900 divided by 90 is easier to round than if I were to write this as 800, even though 835 is closer to 800, right? So that's why I did that. Now, 0 divided by 0 is equal to 0. 90 divided by 9 is equal to 10. Over here, I have 345. 345 can be rounded to 300, and 72 can be rounded to 100. So 300 divided by 100. 0 divided by 0 is equal to 0, so I'm crossing them out. 3 divided by 1 is equal to 3. Over here, I have 559 divided by 11. 559 can be divided into 600, or rounded to 600, and 11 can be rounded to 10. We have 600 divided by 10. I can cross off the zeros because 0 divided by 0 is equal to 0. And 60 divided by 1 is equal to 60. Okay, now I'm going to turn the page. We are on page 94. For page 94, it says right here, Mrs. Johnson spent $611 buying lunch for 78 students. If all the lunches cost the same, how much did she spend on each student? So we are estimating, but we can also find the exact amount. But it says about. About tells me that it is an estimation and we are rounding, okay? Now, I'm picturing in my head Mrs. Johnson. So, I'm picturing Mrs. Johnson right here. And I'm thinking of what is the story behind the question. Mrs. Johnson is what I'm imagining, and she's spending money to buy lunch. For who? For 78 kids. Wow, 78 kids is a lot of kids. So these circles, I'm going to say, represents a lot of kids. I'm not going to draw 78 because that would take me forever, but there's a lot of kids that she needs to spend money on, okay? And each lunch is going to cost about the same. So we're rounding how much it is going to cost. So we have $611 is going to be rounded to 600, and 78 students is going to be rounded to 100. So we have 600 divided by 100. I'm crossing off my zeros because 0 divided by 0 is equal to 0. And 6 divided by 1 is equal to 6. So that means that it's going to cost about $6 for each student. Okay, now we're going to move on to problem 3. An oil well produces 172 gallons of oil every day. I'm picturing in my head a well, okay? And this well has a lot of oil in it, okay? And it's 172 gallons of oil in that well. That's what I'm picturing in my head, oil in well. Now, a standard oil barrel holds 42 gallons of oil. So they're talking about a barrel, and barrels look something like this, and it holds things. Back then, they would have barrels to ship a lot of things. I think today as well. So there's a lot of, they want to put 42 gallons of oil in the barrel. Now they're asking me how many barrels of oil will the well produce in one day. Explain your thinking. So right here, we're dividing. We have 172, and we can divide 172 to 200. And we're going to round to 200, and 42 is going to be rounded to 50. So we have easier numbers to work with. I know that 200 divided by 50, I can cross off the zeros because 0 divided by 0 is equal to 0. And 20 divided by 5 is equal to 4. Okay, so there's about 4 barrels that you can actually produce in one day. About 4 barrels because, and I'm going to explain why. Because 200 divided by 50 is about 4. Okay, and that is all for today. Please let me know if you have any questions in class. Have a great rest of your day.